It looks like it's about time to get started. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
We're excited to have you joining us for the Niswonger Remote Learning Series. Sessions will provide educators with opportunities to extend and refine their practices, engaging students in remote and/or online learning. We will showcase high-impact practices, model strategies, share resources, and highlight ways to facilitate effective remote learning. Although you will see that many of the strategies and resources we share are applicable to in-person traditional learning. Good afternoon and welcome to Integrating SEL Competencies in a Remote Learning Environment. Today's topic is self-awareness. Before we get started with our learning today, we'll go over some general information. First, Zoom. Make sure your mic is on mute, except when you're talking, of course. You can do that by clicking the mic at the bottom left. We'd love to see your face. If you'd like to turn on your camera, please do so by clicking the camera also on the bottom left. And we will be using the chat feature to engage, so please feel free to post questions and interact using the chat box. Presenting with me today is Brooke Drennan, and my name is Linda Stewart. Brooke and I are not counselors or psychologists or experts in SEL, but we have found many helpful resources to learn from, as well as activities to use with students to monitor their social and emotional well-being. If you would like to access the materials from this session, go to the Schedule Session page, and everything we present today will be available there. Social and emotional learning, or SEL, is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. In these 4 sessions, we will discuss self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and social awareness. It is our hope that you leave each session with actionable strategies and resources that you can incorporate into your day.
So before we get started, I'd just like to know, how is everyone feeling today? Because we're going to talk a lot about feeling, so I think it makes sense to start with that. And so if you don't mind, just drop one word in the box that names how you're feeling. I know we're coming from different places. We're all doing different modes of learning at this point, or maybe we haven't started. So how are you feeling? Just drop that in the box, please. So I'm seeing that we have a variety of emotions out there, ranging from anxious. Lauren says she's feeling anxious. Alyssa, overwhelmed. Brandy, pulled. Tracy, jumbled. Maybe Brandy, like a tug of war. And I think that those are feelings that are common to most teachers across the nation right now, as we're trying to navigate and figure out what school is going to look like this year, how we're going to begin, how we're going to support students, and how we're going to do all of the things that we know that we need to do. So I just want you to know those feelings are okay to have, and hopefully we can help you with sort through some of that today, and get some strategies in mind that you can use as you begin the school year. So looking at that, I think we could all benefit from just taking a moment to clear our minds. So we're going to start with just a really short activity, and this may feel kind of strange, so I'm going to ask you to just please bear with us. And if you feel comfortable enough, just close. I see some of us are on video, some of us are not, so just close your eyes and listen. We're going to listen to just a tiny part of a TED Talk as the speaker guides us through just clearing our minds to begin today.
Imagine you're a bear hibernating for the winter. When bears hibernate, they take long, slow, deep breaths in and out through their noses. Take a long breath in through your nose. Let it all the way out. Take another long breath in through your nose. Let it all the way out. Keep breathing like this and feel how relaxed and warm and safe you are in your cozy bear cave. Once more, take a long breath in through your nose and let it all the way out. Now imagine this is how teachers lead the first minute of math class for first graders all across the country. The room becomes calm, and the teacher is able to start the lesson on time with the focused attention of the students. Bite-sized mindfulness, short, kid-friendly practices, when they're done consistently, can be a powerful tool to help our kids lead healthier, happier lives. They're simple to do, they take very little time, and they cost nothing. And in a world that's increasingly fast-paced, where kids are bombarded with media and screens, where they have less and less downtime to just be, these practices can teach kids essential skills: how to calm themselves, how to focus and pay attention, how to manage their behavior and emotions, and how to practice compassion and kindness.
So thank you for doing that, for being vulnerable and just bearing with us on that. And I'd like you to just take a moment, please, and reflect on how did that help you to prepare as a learner to get started today. Maybe think about how you usually begin your classes and how you think this starting like this might help students as we venture out on our virtual learning journey, or even if we're in person. And we're a small group today, so if you feel like if you have a comment, if you want to respond, feel free to just unmute yourself and just tell us your thoughts on that, or put it in the chat. But we're looking at Castle's framework today, which may be familiar to some of you and maybe brand new, but they basically focus on 5 criteria and 5 core competencies. So like Linda said, throughout this series, we're going to be breaking those down. We're going to focus on 1 competency per session. And today we're focusing on self-awareness. Emotional learning, social emotional learning, and how we can support our students in our classrooms and homes and communities is so critical, especially now. And we're starting with self-awareness because many of the competencies rely on first knowing oneself and knowing oneself before you can form those relationships with other people, before you can think about your responsible decision making and your social awareness. So really knowing and being able to label your emotions and process and deal with those. So students can you can help your students do things like correctly label their own emotions, recognize that their emotions have an effect on their behavior, and identify those strengths and interests that they have, and also build on those and help them to express confidence. So today we've curated a wide range of resources to share with you, including some sample teaching activities that we can take a look at later. There are really 2 ways that you can teach these core competencies. One of them is through a standalone lesson. So freestanding instructional activities that focus on these social emotional skills. And I think that that is great to do, but also we're going to talk about integrating these social emotional skills into your regular content. So it's not a standalone thing. It's more of a way to help students integrate that into their day-to-day lives. And I think that a lot of research has found that that's much more effective than the standalone lessons. So we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use and build into your daily routines, and also just how important modeling is, especially for your emotional awareness and mindfulness, just being aware of that as we work with students. We know that it directly connects to students' agency and identity, that they have to believe that they matter and that they have some capacity to act upon the world. So we're helping students develop these skills so that they can take action. And when they have a lack of agency, it really immobilizes them. And that's when we see a lot of acting out, disinterest, apathy. So we'll work through some strategies today that will help with that. And we know that SEL is critical for students in general, but now more than ever. They're coming back to school after a longer break than ever before. I know we have all personally been worried about them during this the lengthy absence, and we've been looking for ways to connect with them and check in on their well-being. So it's really going to be critical to focus on rebuilding that student well-being as they return to school, helping them process those emotions that they've had while they've been out in response to the pandemic, in response to social turbulence, and all of those things that are going on now. So it's really important, and I know that we've seen many organizations focus on sending out materials and help and how critical SEL is now. So it seems like kind of like another buzzword, but today hopefully we'll work through some of the strategies and some of the resources and find some really streamlined, simple ways that you can integrate that actually will help students be better learners and also just help them have like improved mental states among other things. One resource that we're going to make available for you is a roadmap that CASEL has released for reopening that addresses the critical SEL skills that students need right now. And so you can see each session we're going to focus on a different competency. And CASEL says here that looking at the state of how things are currently, that self-awareness is critical to identifying and processing those emotions. So we're going to look at some strategies for that today. And we have a really brief amount of time today, about 30 minutes, and then we're going to spend some time afterward debriefing and talking in more detail if you guys want to stick around. But I think Linda is going to kind of walk us through how the activity is going to go and how we're going to dig into those resources.
So now that you know a little bit more about self-awareness, let's explore it a little further using this Padlet activity. You can get to the activity using the QR code or the link on the screen, and I believe they're going to drop the link in the chat. You can access it that way as well. So what we would like for you to do is select one of the pathways to explore, read the article that is highlighted in red. It's essential for you to get the gist of what they're talking about. Explore 2 or 3 resources highlighted in green, depending on the time. Post your answer to the guiding question in the box highlighted in purple, and feel free to comment below any of the resources to highlight any major takeaways, ideas, questions that surface as you explore. Use the blue share column to share your favorite strategies and ideas with others. So we are going to give you 10 minutes to explore your pathway. Then we will come back together and we'll chat about the guiding questions.
I just want to show everyone what that looks like, just in case there's any confusion. I know that's a lot. And the directions are also at the top of the Padlet as well. When you open the link, it should look like my screen right now. And you're going to see the three pathways. Pathway number 1 is about identifying emotions. Pathway number 2 is practicing mindfulness. And pathway number 3 is providing time for reflection. And to get to the resources underneath each of those pathways, you're going to see a little bar on the side, and you can just slide down and you can see those resources and just click on the ones that you want to open. So if you pick emotions, you're just looking at these resources here at the beginning, and you'll see they're all color coded here on the background. So there's the purple box, there's the red box, and the green boxes are all of the optional ones. So any questions about that before we get started? Okay, so we're going to give you about 10 minutes. And I'm a music person, so I have a timer built in. So I'm just going to start that timer and just give you time to explore. I didn't want it to be too awkward with a lot of silence on here, but I think we need to navigate how to do activities like this with students, so it'll be good practice. The guiding questions are on the slide here. We're thinking about how to integrate awareness of emotions in a virtual setting, how to incorporate mindfulness in a virtual setting, and how to allow students time to self-reflect. All right, so dig in and we'll come back together and talk about all of this when the time is up. I might have cut us short just by a few seconds. I was getting so relaxed just listening to that music. I think this is the most relaxed I've ever been presenting in session. But we are, also, it's one of the quickest sessions that I've ever done. So I think we are running a little short on time for our 30 minutes. And then, of course, we'll have the extended time afterward. But like I said, this is a small group. So I would like us to just maybe take some time and unmute and just kind of debrief a little bit on that. We wanted this to really be focused on you and not a lot of us just talking at you and sharing out one strategy after the next, but we can certainly discuss those strategies. But just looking at the guiding questions and taking some time for reflecting on that. What are some ways that we can integrate awareness of emotions, mindfulness, and self-reflection? So any good strategies that you picked up or aha moments, just feel free to unmute yourself and speak up, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, just add it in the chat. So Tracy says, honestly, reflection time is not my go-to, but it is pivotal. It helps not only our emotional well-being, but also our learning. Such a powerful little thing. So yes, we could build in just some of those short, simple strategies for reflection, either in the middle of lessons, at the end, or just building in that time for daily reflection as far as writing, writing to reflect in journals, and focusing on that metacognition, just having students reflect on how they learn and their own strengths and weaknesses. I think a learner profile would be a really neat way to start out the year with that. And just have them reflect on that throughout the year, even keeping track of what they're reading and how their perspectives are changing to reflect. And there are a lot of good strategies in those resources. Did anyone else pick up on anything that's really standing out to you?
Brooke, I'll share one thing, and I noted it on the Padlet, but I thought it was so interesting under pathway number 3, where it said research shows that most growth in metacognitive ability happens between the ages of 12 and 15. And so just thinking as educators, we're in a position to not only teach content, but also help students learn how they best learn in general, and just what a huge payoff that is for students as they engage in continued academic learning or even learning outside of a traditional, kind of classroom environment. So yeah, I just saw like, ooh, a window there. And we have the chance to impact that as educators. Just spending a little bit of time each day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the idea of bite-sized, whether it's bite-sized mindfulness or Lauren says that she teaches special needs children and allowing them to pick a feeling face to let them know how they're feeling because many of them are nonverbal. So that's really, that's a really good strategy to use with them. Just to identify those and then teach them strategies to process those emotions. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in the self-management session next week. And Alyssa says that she feels like in some ways teachers practice mindfulness every day in some capacity. Yes, I think that's what's, when we talk about SEL, it's nothing new because teachers are doing this and have been building that into their practice because we know that we are educating people, right? So that's what's important at the core. So it's vital to our success as educators, Alyssa says, to continue to improve on our ability to practice mindfulness. And that's when modeling really comes into play, I think, and just helping our students find little ways that they can build that into their day as well, especially if they're working from home. I don't know about you all, but I've struggled working from home just to take that break or just not being able to get out as much as I want to. I think that being mindful of the ways that we're spending our time, and doing little things. One of the articles mentioned do one thing each day that brings joy. So I really like that, and sharing that with students as well as parents. Many of the articles mention sharing strategies with parents that they can use to help students while they're at home. And I see that Bethany just dropped a link in the chat, Headspace, which is a free app for educators. And there are some other apps as well that are under the resources. I really like I don't know if anyone looked at the mindfulness, but I really like the Mindful Life Project. And they have little videos of students leading students through mindful sits, as they call them, and just little strategies like that that you can use. And again, it's not anything really like taking too much time, but I think if you watch the TED Talk that we started with, she really says like that minute that you give up, you get back and so much more, because helping students to process those emotions, to clear their minds, to come in ready to learn, or to get rid of some of the other things that are with them, and to really help them with metacognition, is actually proven to help them academically to be a little more successful. And we're over our time, so I want to be very respectful of you all. I know that we're very, very busy these days. I would love to continue the conversation though, so if you have some time, please feel free to stick around. And we'll skip this reflection now, but I did think that was a really good strategy to even use with students. I hadn't used this one before, but just helping them reflect on their learning. And remembering that engaging the mind without engaging the heart is no education. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And I think that that's what Alyssa pointed out. That's what we're all doing. So, focusing on those little hearts. And,
I find that fascinating. That's Aristotle. I mean, how many years ago is Aristotle? And, you know, same concept. Here we are. And I'd say we're probably busier in terms of what we're engaged in on a regular and daily basis than maybe they were way back when. But I think it's neat that he called that out.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us for this session today. Please take our 1-minute survey and let us know your thoughts about the session, because we're always looking for ways to improve. And we'd like to hear your insights about potential topics for future professional learning. So at this time, we are dropping the link in the chat for you to do that 1-minute survey. If you wouldn't mind doing that for us, we would appreciate it. So again, we thank you for joining our session. Next week, we will explore self-management. And if you'll stick around, we will take the discussion further. Thank you.
thank you all. Gee, that really sounded like more time on paper than it actually was once we got into it. So I hate that we didn't have time to have that in-depth discussion and reflection. But if there's anything that you're interested in, or any questions that you have, or if you'd like me to point out some strategies and resources, if you have time to stick around, there are some links to some really good Google Forms, I think, that you could edit and use in your virtual classroom, whether you're using Google Classroom or Canvas, just to check in with students. I really like the idea on some of the forms, just checking in on emotions, but also just how are you doing? Do you have everything that you need to learn today? And there are daily, weekly reflections. So I think that would be a good way to build in some of these things that would be quick and not too time consuming or painful on your end. And then you would, of course, have all of that data there. The form builds for the report that the Google form would send you. So if anyone's interested in looking at anything like that, or if you're interested in talking about more about mindfulness and little bite-sized mindfulness practices, we could talk about that. We just have questions in general, just feel free to unmute. We'll just be super informal about that.
Brooke, you said some of the resources outlined some ways to have this conversation and support parents similarly. Was it more like how to help parents with their students, or how to help parents be reflective themselves, or both?
Well, it was the article that was about feelings during remote learning, and they didn't mention anything specifically, just really mentioned several times, like teaching students to label their emotions, and then also looping in parents so that they can also be working on that at home. And I think the article said it's not on you to answer every question. So loop in parents if there are discussions that they can help facilitate. And I think that's something that's really important too, because as teachers, we want to take on a lot, and we have a lot on our plates, and a curriculum aside. So just being able to identify some things, but also loop parents in and help support them in ways that they could facilitate that discussion. Because like Linda said at the beginning, we aren't counselors. So we may not know all of those strategies. And I think also something that didn't come up is that you need a plan in case something really heavy comes up that a student would need to see a counselor with, or would need some extra support for. So a plan in place for that, because there are a lot of supports that we have that are trained to deal with certain situations.
Alyssa, I'll answer your question about a certificate. We are not providing certificates of completion for attending these sessions, but kind of leaving that to school and district leaders to decide how they want to count attendance for these sessions. But if I can be of helping any at all to communicate that you were here to a leader, feel free to send me an email, and we can certainly provide what you might need to share with your leader that you did attend.
Lauren, I see that that you commented on some ideas for teaching some calming strategies to our students to be able to manage their emotions. So that is definitely something that we are going to work into our planning for our next session on self-management. Same place, same time next week, we'll be talking about that. And if you have any specifically that you could share that are working well for you, because I know that you're working with a special group of students, we would love to hear your expertise on that. I think that's certainly the next step after just being able to identify emotions, is then being able to manage those. What do I do when I'm stressed? What do I do when I'm angry?
Brooke, I took pathway number one, or chose pathway number one, and I loved the naming emotions wheel. And I feel like as an adult, if that would have been something that I had as a child, I could have really benefited now, because that's still something that I struggle with, and even struggle teaching my personal children with that, as well as my classroom students. But I'm more mindful of that, but feel like that is an excellent resource to be able to share with them, instead of just the I'm sad. Well, what part of sad are you? And I also think it would be great for ELA when you're talking about character development.
Absolutely. Building that into your ELA, to your reading and to your writing. So how is this character feeling? How do we know that? And even just modeling that yourself. I think, like, I'm feeling really stressed out today because I have 5 Zoom meetings and I have my children who are doing virtual learning, and I had to I have all of these things to do. So I'm feeling really stressed out, and just like describing what that feels like without dumping on them, right? But just like, so I went and I took a short walk around the parking lot during my lunch break because being outside really calms my mind. So just modeling that, I think, can go a long way, as well as integrating that into your ELA curriculum and looking at how characters deal with those emotions. And maybe sometimes they don't always deal with them in the best way. And even highlighting that in a discussion, I think, could be really powerful. So doing some things rather than a simple standalone lesson, like this is sad and that could be critical to teach them that, but to also build it in and integrate it, I think, is really crucial. So thanks for that, Brandy. And I see that you mentioned Go Noodle as a resource that you've used for mindfulness as well. So that might be something that people want to check out. Well, you're welcome, Tracy. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you about how to set up the Padlet. I thought it was, I don't know how we came up with this, but I thought it was a good way for a personalized learning path that I hadn't thought of before. And it's really kind of simple to add and to make super interactive for students as well. So I think it would be a good tool to use if you're doing virtual learning.
I'm wondering if it could be a cool, just ongoing class resource, much like you created one for us here. I don't know, I'm just processing out loud, but if I were a teacher and we were talking about effective ways to deal with different emotions, maybe I could even have exercises or strategies tied to different emotions or groups of emotions that at any point a kid has access to, or it's linked on my Canvas page or my Google Classroom page. Even share it with parents and let them know that it's there. But you need to be able to pull that up and say, "Ooh, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling sad, and here are some things that I can do, and here are some resources that I trust because my teachers pulled it together, and I'm not just looked on the big wide world of the internet." But it's linked in my teacher resources for my students. It was just a great way to share resources, just like you did for us.
Great idea. Brandy, could you give an example of a Go Noodle that and how you use it?
Sure. Online, you can just share your screen as it's a video. Lauren, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Go Noodle. Have you used it before? Okay, well, they have the, actually the mind breaks and the mindfulness videos for kids to use. And so you could share that virtually now, or I would do it in my classroom. And then they would write a small reflection as an exit ticket sometimes, but nothing special. That's about it, lady.
Bethany, going back to what you were saying about using the Padlet for something ongoing, I know one of the articles mentioned having a gratitude tree and just writing down things that you're grateful for as a class activity, and not doing that in a generic way, like, okay, now we're going to make our gratitude tree, but this on this day, but having it as an ongoing thing that you're contributing to. So just recognizing things that you're grateful for and then adding that. And so you could set that up as a Padlet and students could add to that as they wanted to. I messed around with creating one on Google Slides, but I think having a Padlet link to go back to would be easier. Of course, in the classroom, they just had little leaves that they would write on and attach to the tree, but I was trying to think of ways to do that virtually. I think Padlet would work for that as well.
I was thinking of that same example in the physical classroom space where I would have kids, like one of my bulletin boards would be just set up as a tree, and we would all just add leaves, and just over the year, it would grow like a little gratitude tree, or we would add other things to it. But yeah, in this virtual space, having that kind of bulletin board that's always up, or, like I noted before, that's like always in the same place on your learning management system that you could direct kids to, or to Brandy's point about taking time every now and then just to tie a reflection to that type of activity. And you know what? We can weave in, other academic skills, like when we ask them to do their reflection, I think as an ELA teacher, that it's a complete sentence, or that it uses a certain type of grammatical something that we've been, learning in the classroom that week, but that idea that I'm making time for that type of reflection, and that it's ongoing, I think that's kind of neat. Never miss an opportunity to throw some academics in there.
I think another strategy that stood out to me on the mindfulness article was coloring. And I think we see that, especially like from a high school teacher's perspective. I see that and I'm like, oh, coloring, what? We're going to spend, we have way too many things to do than spend our time sitting around and coloring. But I was actually in a really interesting session last year with Ashley Bible, Building Book Love. And she has this really great activity that she uses with podcasts. And it's just, she has these coloring sheets that she passes out, and I think she calls it listen and learn. And so it's just having students, they're just coloring on the coloring sheet as they're listening to the podcast. And then of course there are activities after they're finished to connect that to other things that they're reading or learning about, into the class discussion. So when I saw that, I immediately thought of her session with that. I think that could be something that could just help students with mindfulness or focus. So looking at Lauren's comment about suggestions for self-reflection for students who are cognitively low. So I'm wondering if anyone has any ideas on that.
Similar to the emotion face wheel that's in that first pathway, I've seen teachers use like a scale almost, or like a continuum, and kids can move some kind of pointer, or even like a little image of themselves that they kind of decorated at the beginning of the year, or created at the beginning of the year, that they keep. But these scales are up in the room all the time, or they're easy to pull out. And a student, in essence, just places, the little, whatever it is that represents who they are on this continuum. And you can come up with some kind of generic questions that they could kind of respond to, much like we've talked about, like how are you feeling? Or you could have some set like categories where they would just kind of place themselves along the continuum. And especially with emotions, there's a big difference between being, kind of annoyed and being furious, and everything in between, and talking about like, where are you within that kind of realm, and then how do you handle it if you are furious versus annoyed. And so just something as like as simple as a scale could be useful.
I think that as a scale would be really useful. I like the faces idea as well. If they're reflecting on their learning, just a really simple strategy could be something, and I know teachers use this a lot, so this is probably not anything new, but something as simple as like red, yellow, green. So like green is like go, I get it, I'm good, I don't need any help. Yellow is I could use some support. I have questions. I'm struggling a little bit. Or red is like I'm completely lost. I don't understand this at all. So I think you could use that just a simple stoplight in a variety of ways. I think that's something that, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways, just something to help them reflect on, stop and reflect where they are in the middle of a lesson without having to write anything down, just being able to point to a color or to name that color. And just reflecting on their strengths and weaknesses as well as learners. So helping them find those things that they are really good at, and then some things that they could work on, and providing strategies for them to be able to do that, or teaching strategies of what to do when they are struggling. So I'm working on this assignment and I'm really stuck. And I think that's something that we'll talk about a little more with self-management too, is just how are you going to support those students at home when they're working virtually, and how are you going to teach them skills to know what to do when meaning is breaking down, or when they are completely lost, how to manage themselves.
But that made me think too, when kids struggle, like struggle could be all sorts of things. It could be similar to the red light, green light, yellow that you were talking about. It could be that I'm struggling with the content, like I don't understand the material. It could be that I don't understand the directions, and that's why I'm struggling. Or it could be that I've got tons of ideas and I don't know how to, narrow it down. I mean, so maybe even there's a way to create some kind of visual version of what those things are, and that would help a student to actually name what I mean by struggle in kind of a self-reflective way, versus I'm just struggling, or I don't know how to do this, and then they're just kind of done. Like, it helps them name what it is that might be the stumbling block, so that we can then have a strategy to help them meet whatever that need is at that point.
Absolutely. That's definitely something that we will think about when we're planning. It's great to have ideas about what is actually helpful for teachers. Lauren, you're so welcome, and we appreciate you showing up today and learning with us, and we hope that you've taken away at least a couple of things, really specific strategies that you can put to work right away. I don't know if you're back in session yet or not. Some of our schools are virtually and some of them are in person, and we're just all kind of all over the place, but certainly feel free to reach out to us if there's anything that you would like us to include in future sessions, or if there's just anything that you have extra questions about, we would be glad to help you out. And yes, Bethany says you can find the sessions on the website. So she has shared that link again. Thanks, Bethany. All right, so does anyone have any other questions or just comments or takeaways to share right now? We're coming up on time, so I just want to make sure we all got our thoughts in. Okay, well, thank you so much for all joining us today, and hopefully we will see you next week. So take care, everyone, and good luck with all of your virtual and in-person learning journeys.
Thank you.